Hi, it's AJ Heitman, and this is the EMS Today show. Very pleased today to have Lieutenant Anthony Almaguera. He's a lieutenant with FDNY. He was featured in the Washington Post just on Monday on a really big article about FDNY dealing with the COVID and a lot of things about the pay disparity in New York, which has been a hot topic for me. He's vice president of Local 3621, the FDNY EMS Officers Union, representing the lieutenants and captains. Been on the job for 17 years, came on a couple of years after 9/11, and is currently assigned to Station 40 in beautiful Sunset Park, Brooklyn. Welcome, Anthony. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for having me, AJ. I appreciate the opportunity to come on and speak about all the things that are going on.
I think you know that I have a long history with FDNY. Got several calls after 9/11 from people saying that nobody was covering the loss of life of EMS providers or the role that EMS providers played that day. And I know you lost Carlos Lilo and Ricardo Quinn, and there were some of the private hospital paramedics that were lost as well. It was tragic, but it was also a pivotal point for me. I made a decision that we were going to come to New York, and Lisa Dion and I traveled to New York with all of what we thought were the proper clearances. And then we arrived in town, and the morning that we were supposed to go down to headquarters, we got a call saying that the PIO was not going to allow us to speak to anybody. And I got on the phone and I called Andy McCracken, who was the chief at the time, and I said, Andy, what's going on? We're in town. We got to do this story. We got to find out the story from the FDNY perspective. And I said, Lisa and I aren't leaving. If we have to go hang around at hospitals and talk to folks at the curbside, we'll do that. And he was very gracious. He cut the mustard real quick and went through the bureaucratic red tape. And we went down and sat around the table at the station under the bridge in Brooklyn. And it was solidified a lot of close friends at that point in time. Lisa Dion and I got very close to some people. One was Lieutenant Rene Davila, who unfortunately after 9/11 took his own life. Part of the tragedy of 9/11, actually, he was a very high emotional guy, did a really good job on Church Street, and we decided we were going to do special supplements, which we did. And then we came back at the 5th anniversary, at the 10th anniversary. Teresa McCallion and I, just an amazing adventure in the whole thing. And Alex Litsky, he was the first one to give radio transmissions that day, and he's still on the job. I think I knew back then how hard the people of FDNY worked. I certainly know now. I've had a long friendship and work relationship with Glenn Aceda. He's on my EMS medical advisory board, and so
I talk to Glenn all the time.
So when 9/11 is really not past us. I don't think we learned a lot of lessons from 9/11 about wearing N95 masks, etc. And then all of a sudden you get trapped into this surprising, what I call the gray death of COVID. And so tell me your first impression when you really started to feel that, oh my God, here we go in New York.
Well, I had been away on a vacation to New Zealand, and I came back the end of January. And while I was in New Zealand, I was getting messages from coworkers back home. Hey, you're on that side of the world. There's this virus, New Zealand is not that far from China. So we were made aware of it then. We got home, and the beginning of February, we started doing in our roll calls, because where I work in Sunset Park is a large Chinese community. And we started doing roll calls that, hey, there's a virus. We have a large Chinese community. You may get some travelers that come over, who potentially have these things. They're saying it mimics a flu. And that's pretty much all we knew at the time. The president was saying that, it's going to go away, and the mayor was telling us to go to the movies still. So, while we on the ground were trying to take it seriously, I think some people in command and definitely, government didn't ramp up the necessary services and equipment that we thought we had already. You know, every year they make us go back for this training, and we do an Ebola training where we get in the suits and everything else. And, you know, it made us all feel that somewhere in a part of the city nobody knows about, there's a warehouse that you need. Two people can't have the key at the same time, and you open it up and it's nothing but, you know, hazmat and N95 mask and enough to, you know, last the war. And about a week and a half into the virus, when it really hit, they were telling us they were running out. So the first time I started noticing something different was two things. My little sister works with me, and she got sick, but they didn't diagnose it as COVID. Turns out she had it.
Mm.
She had all the symptoms, and it would come, it would go. It took about 3 weeks to get better. And then I would say around St. Patrick's Day, for me personally, is when I started noticing patients that had a disconnect in how they were presenting and what the monitor and the pulse ox was showing. So we had a guy who was about 74%, not cyanotic, not tripod position. He said, I feel a little short of breath. He was speaking in full sentences. And I was like, well, it must be broken. Let's get another one.
Hypoxic. It's,
yeah.
You're getting ready to intubate that gentleman.
100%. And we put on another pulse ox, and it was the same thing. And I'm thinking, well, this guy must not have any circulation. His fingers must be cold. And then I got another patient like that. And I was like, wait, there's something going wrong. And it was about 3 days later, when 4 days later, when we started noticing the call volume, which is normally 3,500 to 4,000 in New York City,
right,
on a given day, above 4,000. And on the 21st of March, boom, the bomb exploded. We went from, I don't have it exact, in the 4,000s the day before to over 6,500.
Because everybody was panicking?
Well, so if you fit the timeline of when the mayor was saying, keep going to the movies, keep going to restaurants, that was around March 12th or 13th.
Right.
This virus has a 5-day incubation period, roughly. So if you're still living normal life here, 5 days later is the 19th, 20th, 21st. And then I'd say the first 4 days of this was people genuinely sick. And then we were busy with genuinely sick people and people who were feeling some of the symptoms, but wanted reassurances. And none of us were mad at them. You know, hey, you know, I have a scratchy throat. I call 911. I think I have it. And, you know, they wanted somebody to come because the doctors fled. You know, the hospitals were overrun. You know, it was hard for people to get clinic appointments and stuff.
For people not familiar with the with the New York 911 system, just explain a little bit about you know, you have dozens of units that are on the road, hundreds of units, and also have private hospitals that come into your system and are 911 ambulances.
Yeah, so the fire department of New York runs over 450 municipal ambulances in New York City, right? That's where the department I work for. And then because we're so busy and understaffed and underfunded, the city has contracted out to private hospitals and private ambulance companies to augment the system with ambulances. So just for example, in Brooklyn here, you have Methodist Hospital. Methodist Hospital runs ambulances under the Methodist Hospital name, and then on the side of the door, it'll say FDNY 911 provider. So as a lieutenant, I'm also their lieutenant. They're under the same command structure. If we're on the scene of an MCI, they're following my direction or higher rank. They don't operate independently of the rank structure or of the way we have to do business in 911. They just have the entity that they're representing on the side of the ambulance.
And to me, it's one of the most unusual but functional systems that I've known for decades. And I think historically, government has assumed that, well, since they work under our command structure, we can continue this whole thing and not have to pay for it. But it does sometimes present problems, I know. But how about how was staffing during the early days of COVID?
Well, for the hospitals, they were hit just as hard as us. Um, for the hospital units, the problem with the hospital units is they don't have line of duty injury insurance. They were forced to wear the same N95 mask all day long, which our unions refused to do that. There was just not as much protection for them. So there's a lot of issues with having a private entity operate a 911 system, but not to the same level or standard as the 911 system, as the municipal 911 providers, as far as equipment and protection. For us, at the height of the pandemic, we had 25% of our workforce, the EMS workforce, was out sick. We have a workforce of roughly 4,200. As you know from years, we're chronically understaffed. So roughly 25% of us were out sick. Unfortunately, 5 of us have passed away from COVID. And recently we've had 2 suicides.
Yeah, that one young
Stress related.
member was to me very sad. I mean, I tried to follow
23.
it all. The ones that were lost, did they have comorbidity?
4 out of the 5 did not. The other one, I was told, had an underlying history of asthma. I won't provide the names for HIPAA
No,
reasons,
no, no, no.
Yeah.
Now, I would have thought that you still have the LSU units that are around the city, the logistical support units.
Yeah, but they don't. They come out for MCIs and
That's
stuff.
just
We
for
don't.
MCIs, but I would have thought that they would have been packed just like you would, with extra N95s, et cetera. How did they solve the N95 problem?
So there was a phone call I was on with the union president, Vincent Variali, the union vice president and president for 2507, the chief of the department, and the chief of EMS, and the chief medical officer, the chief medical doctor, which is David Prezant.
Mm-hmm.
And they were telling us we have about another 4 or 5 days worth of N95 supplies at the current rate. And you can only wear the N95 mask on 3 specific call types. Everything else, you are to wear a surgical mask, which is obviously lesser protection.
Right.
The unions objected right away. Let's say I go into your house and I'm treating you for a sprained ankle, and I'm doing my thing, and in the corner there, somebody's hacking up a lung, and I go to you, what's wrong with that lady? And you say, well, she tested positive for COVID. I'm exposed,
Right.
So we objected to that. And we went back and forth. We actually issued a statement saying we are denying the order, and we will continue to use the N95 mask from the union standpoint. And even the SOA, the Superior Officers Association, which is the 1-star and deputy chiefs,
Right.
were in on that. So you basically had the bottom 2/3 of the command structure saying no. And then we were told there was a shipment coming in that bought us a little time. And then they were able to get donations. The unions were able to get donations of N95 masks. One of the funniest things was, and I'm not trying to plug the website, but Pornhub, the porno site, actually donated thousands and thousands of masks to the unions for us to wear. I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
We had to rely on these outside entities. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to spread it out. Eventually, when the call volume started to drop, we were able to catch up with supplies. We still don't have enough cleaning equipment. Last night, I had members calling saying that they don't have Lysol or wipes. We're making our own bleach, just like you did 40 years ago. We're making 1 part
Mm-hmm.
bleach and 9 parts water, which is fine, but it's 2020, right? We're supposed to be this advanced system, and we're far from it.
Now, the article in the Washington Post talks about the fact that nobody really wants to be a paramedic. Kids want to be firemen and police officers. And, even now, I still see articles where the public, when they see an ambulance, just now they're thinking of death, that somebody in there has COVID. So
Correct.
it's not the love. We didn't get much of the love after 9/11, and nobody's really focusing on how hard the people worked during COVID. What about your first experience when you really, because you went, are you still intubating or did you stop intubating? COVID.
No, there's still intubations.
Yeah. And face shields, do they give you face shields?
Yep, face shields we have, or glasses, either one. We have the N95. We were wearing surgical masks over the N95 to provide an additional layer of protection.
Right.
The gowns were inconsistent. We went anywhere from super professional, ICU surgical open heart surgery gowns to paper gowns that were ripping. You go to put them on and, it's in shreds. So you put on a second one. You had these, half gowns on.
It's an MCI of the worst kind. An MCI where kind of death is trying to get at you. Has it toned down now at all?
Yeah.
Has the call volume? I know the call volume has, and then for a while there was an increase in cardiac arrest and then a decrease, right?
A tremendous increase. On average, I'm told New York City has about 60 to 80 cardiac arrests a day, in that range. During the height of this, we were at almost 400 a day, 300, 250, 300. I mean, that's as a paramedic, and we're the busiest EMS system in the world, New York City, the last numbers I saw. So even in the busiest EMS system in a heat wave, in a dangerous neighborhood, maybe as a medic, you're doing 2 or 3 cardiac arrests a week, in the busy areas.
Right.
These guys were doing 4 a day. I went to 13 cardiac arrests in 16 hours in one day. I had another lieutenant tell me she went to 14. These are the things that were happening. It was crazy. The crews were coming back, and I was never in the military. You have that look of people who have just been through war. They'd sit there and you could see them numb out after the shift. And I had members cry, when is it going to end? And I talked about in other articles and stuff that PTSD, you need 30 days after the incident to diagnose. We're not after the incident.
It's ongoing.
There's no, you wake up, it's COVID. You go to sleep, it's COVID. You, on the news, Texas and Arizona and Florida, they're spiking. This past week, I had 2 EMTs at my station alone get infected with COVID, test positive. We're not over this, Yes, it's not going through the roof like it was in New York City, but, you see everybody. They're all hanging out now with no mask. And
it's become nonchalant. People around stations and other places feel like it's over, but it's not over. And you know what the public doesn't see? They don't really see the decon process. They don't see when you extubate a patient. These are messy codes, right? I mean, the airway is a mess.
So you're right when you asked earlier, a lot of the patients do have comorbidity, right? There are some. And so you get somebody who's in heart failure and you intubate them, right? And this virus sends them into overload. And, you go to extubate, even when you're intubating, I watched one guy look like old faithful, coming up the tube, all the fluid in the lungs. It's crazy. When I actually went to the hospital with a crew one day, and one of the doctors I know, and the hospitals were nuts. I've never seen this, but people outside waiting to be triaged for 2 hours. In Brookdale Hospital, I had a crew come up to me, say, "Lieutenant, I'm sorry, I've been here so long. I didn't even realize I wasn't going there for that."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "How long have you been here?" He goes, 3 hours.
Oh my goodness.
And I said, "Why?" He goes, "We brought in a critical patient. They have the patient intubated on our stretcher. They don't have any stretchers for him. They're using our stretcher to keep the patient alive.
Right.
So the doctor showed me an X-ray of a COVID patient, and it looked like there was pneumonia in all parts of the lung. Right? You had this white and black. You couldn't make out the lung. And I said, "Is that what we're combating?" He says, "Yeah, that's what it's looking like." And I'm like, "What are we doing?"
Somebody described it like maple syrup in the lungs. It just the
Yeah,
storm reacts inside. That's when they see that the tentacles that you see, what they have as the symbol of COVID. It bothers me every time I see it because those tentacles are just where the explosions are occurring, and then all of a sudden you have a patient, and that's what's happening to them is they all of a sudden they're not feeling good a couple days, and then that storm happens, and then the family calls you because it's cardiac arrest. 1 minute they're alive, and the next minute they're in cardiac arrest. And EMS
it's
isn't used to seeing that. I mean, we're used to going to cardiac arrest. This is a lung arrest that
right.
causes cardiac arrest.
Right. We had patients that we took from upstairs that were sat in bed and saying, "I feel a little short of breath." By the time we got in the ambulance, they went cardiac arrest. And you feel like you should have some time, but we get them in the ambulance, all of a sudden they're coding.
And people have asked me because they know that I get around. They're saying, "Well, we're not seeing this in Nebraska. We're not seeing this wherever." Well, that's because you don't have the density. The spread of COVID in New York. It's a very dense island, and people who aren't familiar, haven't been to New York, just as much as it's a beautiful city with so many people and vibrant, it's a vibrant place for COVID to visit.
And if you look at the communities that were hardest hit, they were heavy immigrant communities. Immigrant communities tend to be on the poorer side,
Hmm.
first generation, multiple generations in a house, or multiple people in an apartment.
Yeah.
I went to a home the other day, and there was a Chinese immigrant. He had 12 people in a 2-bedroom apartment. If one person has COVID, they all have it, right?
Right.
And that's why it disproportionately impacted minorities and poor people, because they didn't have the resources, to get out. There was an article I remember when this was all first starting to happen, and it got to me. I don't begrudge anybody wealth. You earned it. God bless.
Right.
But these people are like, well, this is going to be happening, so I'm going to go leave for the Hamptons
Right.
or to my house upstate. And I said in the article, the rest of us were like fish in a barrel, with no ventilators, no anything. Um, the hard part too is in the EMS community, because we're paid so much less than the other 911 providers. We live in these communities.
Hmm.
And FDNY EMS is 54% minority. It's 38% women. There's so many people. Myself, I have 3 jobs. There's so many others that have multiple jobs. They live in East New York and in the Bronx and in Harlem, and because they can't afford to live other places. So here they are working in it, and now they're living in it, and they're watching their coworkers start to drop.
Well, you're paid about $35,000 less than the private 911 providers that are running calls beside you, right?
We're paid $35,000 less than fire and PD.
Right.
We have 3 times the call volume as firefighters, and that's including their CFR runs that they go on. If you took that out, we'd obliterate them completely. And I don't begrudge them making their money. It's not about that.
No,
I
they
don't
work
want them
hard
to
and
not
they're in
have.
a dangerous
Yeah,
profession, but they
right.
personally, and I know from many that I've spoken to, they wouldn't want to do your job. You
They
know,
don't. We've
I,
lost 68% in the last 4 years.
yeah, but I mean, they wouldn't want to hop over and let's say the pay was equal and say, oh, do you want to run ambulance for a while? They don't want to run
No.
ambulance. They don't want to be, carrying people down 4 flights of stairs that weigh 350 pounds, and having calls backed up and backed up and backed up.
Right.
When some of the other people that I interviewed over the past couple of weeks said that, they don't begrudge anybody their pay, but while they're driving by a couple of fire stations, they're going on their 15th call. And historically, The members of FDNY, even when it was health and hospital, were not paid parity with the fire police profession. And how do we get over that? I just you know, you're certainly
Well,
not going to get it from this mayor. I'll tell you that right now.
it's the most frustrating thing is that in my career and in all my work with the union, I have never seen the stars align. Right? People didn't know what EMS did before because, as I mentioned in the article, we don't like to think about the ambulance, right? Because that's sickness, that's illness. We don't.
Right.
We try and put that in the back, and there's nothing that makes us sexy to the public eye, right? And you're right. People played cops and robbers as a kid, or they played with the toy fire truck. You know, the Hess toy fire truck every year.
Right. Right.
All those things. There's no paramedic playing, right? And that's the culture we live in. You know, the doctors are made sexy on TV, right? Even House, he's a drug addict, but he's made to come in and save the day. But the depictions of nurses or paramedics were all fried, we're all burnt out. You know, look at Nurse Jackie, look at Bringing Out the Dead. So it's a reflection of society. If you don't have a society that says that that's a necessity, then they're not going to capitulate and put pressure on politicians to take care of us. But I think after the pandemic, it really woke a lot of people up, right? Those sirens you heard for 3 months, they weren't cops and firefighters, they were ambulance sirens. We were coming to your house. You saw it firsthand. I think the cat is out of the bag. I think they realized that, hey, there was always this thing called EMS. And why do they have these problems? Like all these interviews I get, they go, I don't understand how come when you die on the job, you only get 3 years pay and the cops and firefighters get it for life and medical benefits. How come when you get sick, you only get 12 sick days? You're taking care of sick people and you only get 12 sick days a year? I'm the canary in the system,
Right.
right? H1N1, SARS, Ebola. The first Ebola patient in the United States was treated by FDNY EMS. And 12 sick days a year? I mean,
So
it's insanity.
so with all of your unions, is there a plan? Do you have an approach now to try and get this corrected? You know, I tried to correct it 2 years ago from the stage of EMS today, and you know, because I called you guys and everybody else in this country complete responders. We're not first responders. We're with that patient from the time we touch them until the time we say goodbye to their family.
Yes.
Many times in the waiting room. And then we have to
Yes.
clean up our units. I mean, nobody realizes that after every call that you go on, I mean, your people are going to be addicted to bleach. Probably the cleanest ambulances in the world right now because everybody's cleaning everything as best they can. And then talk a little bit about going home. Nobody realizes that when you go home after a COVID shift, which I call every shift, you have to take your clothes off. Could you explain your procedure? I mean, you can't just walk into your house. I think we learned
No.
that
So
after 9/11. We had people after 9/11 go home with their uniform on that had everything, all of the carcinogens on it.
right. Right. 9/11, tragic, singular event, right? So after 2 or 3 days, those clothes were gone. You know, they were washed. You didn't have to worry about recontaminating unless you were working on the pile, obviously.
Right.
But with COVID, everything I go into in normal day life could be potential. And as working it, you know, I've never been thankful to be single, you know, but I
Yeah.
was thankful I was single for this because I came home, I stripped in my vestibule, right?
Right.
I came up my stairs to my apartment and showered and got myself, you know, ready. I had guys and I had men and women I worked with. There was one guy, he had 2 immunocompromised kids. And he showed me one day, he wouldn't let me share the video. He didn't want people, and that's fine, I understand. But he videoed what he has to do. He gets to this front door, he strips down to his underwear. Between the front door and the other door, he set up a decon area. So he decons himself. From that point to this point, outside the door, he has another N95 gown, so he can interact with his children. And you know, we had
Then what do
I
you do
had
with those
lieutenants.
clothes? Leave the clothes outside?
When he comes out the next day, he puts it in a bag and brings it to get deconned or washed in an outside entity. We had guys and girls that were sleeping in their cars
I know.
because they didn't want to go home. And the
Were,
city,
were
we
there
asked
no
the city from the,
arrangements? Were there no arrangements by the city to house anybody that was exposed? Unless,
none.
well, if they were positive, did they have, if somebody is COVID positive, what's the procedure now?
Go home.
Go
Oh,
home,
now
isolate at
now
home?
isolate at home. That was the initial procedure. A week into it, which I still have the messages. We were sending the city and this department, the fire department, we need to set up housing. And they refused. We can't provide that, they said. And we suggested all these hotels are empty.
Right?
Commandeer one, you know?
Well,
They
they
refused.
housed the EMS people that came from other entities outside the city. That
Right.
was a
So
burr under my saddle. If they could do that, they could certainly have, one motel that would be set up for um, people that were tested positive.
eventually they capitulated, but it was only after union pressure. We set up the first hotel. The unions. We paid for people to stay in hotels. And then I'd say about a month into the pandemic is when the city said, "Oh, we have some hotels throughout the city." You know, but people were sleeping in their cars until then.
What about nursing homes? God, I felt so bad seeing who would not begin to realize that we can't send people back to the nursing homes that tested positive for COVID? I mean, don't know whether that's Cuomo or he's getting the blame for it, but somebody certainly was asleep at the switch. And I don't care what they say about the CDC saying it early on. You're not supposed to send people back to a nursing home.
Yeah, it's funny because in the EMS community that didn't register. We were like, okay, we took the nursing home patients to the hospital who had COVID. We didn't realize they were coming back until I went and did overtime out in Rockaway, New York.
Hmm.
On that peninsula, there's a high proportion of nursing home patients, nursing homes.
Right.
Um, and I was talking to some of the crews, and that's when it dawned on me for the first time, where they were like, we picked up this one guy 3 times. I said, what do you mean 3 times? Well, he had COVID. Then you send him back. Um, he's still sick. We had to bring him back. I said, why are they going back to the nursing home? Why aren't they staying in the hospital? Or there's got to be some other like isolation unit set up somewhere. We didn't even realize that.
Well, you had the hospital ship that was underutilized, and that very easily could have been where you put the nursing home patients. I, as an EMS planner, looked at that and said, "Oh, if you gave me that facility, that's a magnificent facility. Let's fill
Right.
that sucker. Let's fill that boat."
Yeah, I think maybe they had 100 patients on it.
That's about
The
it.
field, the field hospitals they set up, they could have used that. I mean, in a pinch,
And they were going to use
you
it
know.
for non-COVID patients, and then a couple snuck by, and oh, what a fiasco! And then they release it, and we're going to have another spike here, and it's back in its home port.
I
Um,
think I think that's the concern a lot of the members I represent. They're looking at what's happening in Texas and Arizona. The stress level is high. We went from, and as we're still doing all the regular 911 calls.
yeah,
People are still getting shot and having heart attacks and delivering babies. That didn't go away during all this. So you got that going on. You got the
and what the
protests,
public doesn't realize is you have to go on those calls thinking that they could also be COVID.
right?
You could go to a motor vehicle accident, and I get tons of photos from people, and I see no one, particularly in the fire service, wearing masks around an extrication, and it's going to kill some people.
Yeah, it already has. It
I
already
mean,
has.
every call like that is a hazmat call. Every nursing home call is a hazmat call. And for a
You know
while,
what?
the fire department did not want to go on any respiratories. Am I right?
They stopped going to medical calls. Period.
Yeah. Is that
You
still in
know.
effect?
No, they started coming again. I think if there was one thing that they did that, took the shine off of them, because they were very public about that,
Mm-hmm.
and public were like, "What do you mean?" I remember seeing the chat groups and social media where they were like, "What do you mean they're not going to the calls? That's your job.
They're paid
This is so
$35,000 more than you, and they're not going to those calls.
right." And when the president of the UFA, who just got voted out, by the way, he made this video that leaked out because they were going to go nuclear option, which was putting firefighters back on ambulances,
Oh yeah, yeah,
because we were so decimated, 25-30% sick leave.
right.
And the video, he looked like somebody, pooped in his milk. He was so stressed that he had to give this message to his constituents and say, yeah, listen, guys, we're here for the city, but we're gonna have to, if we're ordering ambulances, we're gonna have to go. And I'm like, wait a minute, man, you're you should have just been a little more upbeat about that. Hey, you know what? We're here for the city. He just looked like, because he knew how his members were gonna react. They
And
don't
then
want
we bring
anything to do
all
with
the
it.
ambulances in from all over the country, and some of those people came down COVID as well. God bless them for coming to the city and for helping to cover. But oh my goodness, the gentleman from Colorado, he's a grandfather. He came, goes home,
Yeah.
never got home. I don't think he ever got home.
No, he didn't go back home. He went back home in a coffin.
In a coffin. To me, the whole thing, I mean, the salary thing is, it's going to be very difficult with all of the budgets now. But the benefits, I just can't believe the benefits. If a family of 4 loses their dad to COVID, they only get 3 years of coverage. And then what do
3
they
years of
get after
pay,
that?
no coverage.
3 years of pay. Yeah, no insurance
No
coverage.
coverage. Right. So
Uh,
right now, if they die, they're going to get a check. A top pay EMT is about $50,000. So the family will get a check for $150,000, one lump sum,
one lump sum.
which is because we don't have a true death benefit. Part of that is coming out of the members' pension fund, right? The
Mm-hmm.
unions will provide a little money, but not enough. And that's it. Good luck. $150,000 may seem like a lot of money, but it is not a lot of money, and no medical benefits. I mean, it's astounding to me that you can't convince the mayor to be like, all right, listen, I understand the contract is a negotiation process, blah blah blah. Nobody's gonna blink if you gave us unlimited sick and equalize the death benefit. No person, even the most ardent, conservative, budgetary watchdog is gonna. I can't imagine them saying, "Well, those guys don't deserve to have sick leave equal to the others because
Yeah,
it would never."
he said a couple of years ago, I quoted it. He said, "Well, they're different. Yeah, they're different.
Right, they do important work, but they're different.
They're different. They're not different. They're complete. Yeah, they're different because they're complete responders. They're with your loved one the entire time.
I gave this interview the other day, and I said, to show you how psychologically humans don't want to acknowledge the concept of being injured or ill, you always see the photo of the guy, the firefighter, running out of the burning building with the kid.
Right.
Somehow the media always gets that, right? And it's in various poses. They're running out like this or like this, and you always see the face of the kid somehow. But they never get this photo.
Yeah.
Who they handing that kid to? You and me.
Right. They see the person handed off and the doors of the ambulance close, and they have no idea what's going on in the back of that ambulance.
That's right. They don't do that because they give hope to the people with the photo, right? It's heroic, it's hopeful. And then you go, the ambulance is where the illness takes place, right? Where the work is taking place. And that, to me, that shows a complete team effort, right? You needed somebody to pull them out of the fire, and then you need somebody to revive them. You know, you need it all.
Well, here's AJ's opinion now. I don't know whether it's my editor's hat on or my editor page or whatever you want to call it, but you cannot see a national broadcast of COVID without seeing the FDNY ambulance. They have that footage of the FDNY ambulance going by all the time. It's imprinted in everybody's head. We need to use that same image with a good public campaign that says, pay parity and benefits. The public needs to know through a campaign, probably through the unions that are funded, to show this to the public, because the only way you're going to change is if the public asks that it be changed. And if your borough councilmen and people like that begin to change it, because the mayor has got a budget and a line item, and he's so used to seeing EMS at $35,000 less and just ignoring it. And he's so used to seeing the private hospitals coming in to bail out the city, that the public needs to understand we got a problem here. I mean, your attrition rate, the institutional knowledge that you're losing, you're not going to keep people, even the guys. I mean, God love you for how many years you're on the job, but some people, as soon as they can bail and go to another system where they're paid more money, we see this in areas. San Diego Police Department was well paid well below the surrounding communities, and it took the union a couple of years, but they just recently got that increase. Thank God, because now nobody's going to get an increase in the police department. Police are not seen as the favorite children right now. But, and God love the police, because they do work hard. I don't begrudge them anything, but I want equality. I really want equality. This is really, to me, it's a crime. It is a crime, not just in the pay. Some people would argue about the pay. The skill level that's required to be a paramedic is equivalent, if not greater than some of the RNs, and they get mad at me for saying that. But the emergency medical care and running a code in somebody's basement or up in their attic, that deserves extra pay as well. If the public, and a day in the life now, they stop showing cops, and maybe they should start showing EMS a little bit more, and maybe they will. I don't know. But my recommendation is that the union really look at a public campaign, a polite public campaign, that just says these are the facts, and you have on one side all of the public servants, and you show what the inequities are, and then down the bottom it says this needs to be corrected. This needs to be corrected. Everywhere they go in New York, they should say this needs to be corrected. We're saying Black Lives Matter, EMS matters as well. We got to take care of our EMS workers, and
which ironically are majority Black lives.
Yeah.
In New York City, EMS workers are mostly minority.
Right.
You said something just now I wanted to touch on, because I've been saying that we the unions have started that campaign here. That's how we got the council, we got the state senate, almost every editorial board, and not only in New York City, but the Washington Post, the LA Times, etc., have all said, hey, EMS has to be this thing. But you said a word just now that I've been saying. The real crime of this will be that you had all these people who have gone through this pandemic as EMS providers and protests and everything else in between, have all this wonderful experience, and the first chance they get, they're going to leave. Wouldn't it be nice, AJ, if the next pandemic, which is probably 3 to 4 years away if you go by prior models, and it comes here and you and I look at each other and go, oh, this again? Okay, let's get the boots on. Right? Because we've been through it.
Right.
What's happening now, I already see it. There's a lot of the old timers retiring. Yesterday, we lost somebody who was 39 years on the job. He's just done. You're going to have a whole bunch of people pull the plug this year for that. And the first fire class they have, gone. They're going to leave at EMS in droves unless we take care of them. And I don't understand why that doesn't translate to the mayor. It translates to the public when I sit there and give these interviews and say, if I told you I was taking you to a hospital where everybody in that hospital, doctors, nurses, and everybody else, had less than 4 years experience, would you go? So why is it okay to have less than 4 years experience when I bring the hospital to you? Right? You wouldn't go to that hospital, but you're calling 911 in your most urgent time of need, and you're getting kids. And when I sit there and tell the city that this is a problem, when the president of the union says this is a problem, they say we don't have an attrition rate because they're fudging the numbers because they're going to fire. So they think, well, they still work
They're
for the
still in
fire
the city.
department.
Yeah.
Right. So when we sit there and tell them that, and then when we go, well, how do you account for 5 EMS academy classes a year? You know, when there's a sanitation class in New York City, they get 30, 40,000 applicants. They get the cream of the crop for sanitation. And there's one, and then you don't see another test for 5 or 6 years. We're holding 5 academy classes a year. That's not a successful business. You know, that's entry level. That's treating us as like a McDonald's, you know? This is going to
Well,
be in.
correct me if I'm wrong. I heard that some of the people that were cleaning the subways were making more than the EMTs. Is that
Oh,
correct?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the EMT is making about 16 and change an hour. You know, they want to raise federal minimum wage to $15 an hour, which I'm all for.
Right.
I'm
Sure.
all for it. But if and I don't compare workers in that way. You know, I hate seeing those memes like this guy's flipping burgers. He deserves 15. I don't think so, because look at this guy who's in the back of the ambulance with blood all over it. You know, no, the guy flipping burgers deserves what he deserves.
But
I
you certainly deserve combat pay.
correct.
EMS
Right.
deserves combat pay for sure.
Right. You know, I'm not begrudging the burger guy. I want the public and the entities responsible that we have to negotiate with to say, your job is just as valued and you deserve to have this, because the numbers show EMS has the highest suicide rates per capita. There's more cops that commit suicide, but there's more cops. We have the second highest rates of substance abuse. We have the highest rates of divorce. We don't live long. You've been around longer than me a little, it looks like. And you know the EMS guys you work with, you see them. This past week, we lost 3 people here in the fire department. We unfortunately had Lieutenant Matt Keene commit suicide, 38 years old. We lost Doug Gertz, 25-year veteran, in May.
Mm-hmm.
And we lost another guy last night, 26 years on the job. They're not making it to retirement.
And you know what people don't understand is that 26 years on the job means that I would love to have him take care of my family. He's got so much experience, his IV techniques, understanding and how to diffuse a domestic violence call, and what the city, well, I know they realize it, but they're not correcting, is the fact that you bring in a nice young EMT, but you got to train him, and you got to try and build him to understand COVID like a 26-year member. No, that just doesn't happen. It's so hard to throw 26 years worth of knowledge into somebody. And when that person walks off the job and somebody fills them with 1 week on the job, look what happened in Minneapolis with a couple of those cops that were on that scene. It was their third day on the job. And people said, well, why didn't they say something? Because the guy who was doing the murder was their supervisor. You know, and he controls whether they pass or whether they don't pass. You're not going to correct.
That's another thing I'm concerned about. This pandemic would have looked completely different if you had a bunch of old timers sprinkled in with new people, right? Where I sit there and say, all right, kid, let's go. This is how we do this. You know, this is how it's supposed to go. You and I are experiencing a pandemic for the first time together, but the steps are the same. And I've been through the steps and you haven't. And with the protests and everything that's happening, the concern I have is I have a lot of young kids and they're going to go to a scene potentially where there's going to be all this craziness with cops and everything else. Now, if I go on that scene, I have no issue telling the cop, get off of him.
Right.
I've done it. I've yelled at police, get off him, stop doing this. I have no issue doing that. And you know what? When they see me, and not just me, but other lieutenants, people who have years in the job, the cops look at you and they go, okay, you know, there's a connection.
Right.
The kids don't have that. They don't have the ability to go over and say, hey, listen, get off of him. You're
This is
hurting
my
him.
patient. I've said,
This is my patient. This is my patient. Right.
right.
You can leave him in handcuffs. He is coming on the stretcher. You need to get off of him. You know, we had that happen. Look at Eric Garner in
I
Staten
saw
Island.
it.
The 2 EMTs were frozen. You know, there's 2 lieutenants for the entire borough of Staten Island. That's insanity, right?
Right.
With such a young workforce and the senior people being lieutenants out in the field, there's only 2 of them.
And that wasn't even a city ambulance, and that worker
That wasn't
came up,
even a city, right?
you know, CPR wasn't started there. I mean,
Right.
you know, there's all kinds of medical issues with the whole thing. You know, the bottom line is, you know, the respect that I have for you. I will pledge to you that I personally, and certainly Gems, will continue to push whatever you guys can give me. But, and it's nice to talk to the Washington Post because the rest of the world knows, oh, God, those poor workers. But you need the people that are riding the subways to be able to see something that says this needs to be corrected. I mean, if this isn't corrected now, it'll never be. I mean, FDNY
Well,
had such a high profile. Everybody saw the exceptional work. Everybody saw the stress. I mean, you just have to show. I mean, a photo of a weary EMS worker. I watch the shows and they're interviewing nurses going home from a shift. Put the damn camera inside with a, you know, one of the paramedics who's sleeping in his car, you know, because he can't go home and is afraid to go home. You know, I don't know. You know, I've said to my wife, I don't know what I would have done. Like right now, I have comorbidities, so you know, the COVID would love to find me, and I'm doing my best that it's not going to find me. And I'm next week I'm having a knee replacement, and I was only a part-time paramedic. I mean, I'd go home from my administrative job in my community and run as a paramedic, or work part-time in the city of Allentown as a paramedic. But my knees are shot. My knees are shot.
right,
Everything I did in EMS, I did kneeling down. I always knelt
right.
next to the patient. I always took great pride in being able to intubate somebody with my legs apart and my head down there. And now to walk up a flight of steps, I don't know how a 29 or 39-year veteran of FDNY can still do it after all these years.
It's
Because you know,
listen, you know,
when you came on the job, you didn't have the stretchers that you have today.
no,
I was when
I
I
had
was
a
on the
2-man
job, we had a
stretcher.
Model 30 stretcher. You know, there was no
Yeah,
automatic loading. Pick up
no,
somebody 280 pounds, you know, you and your partner had to split that weight at the back of the ambulance.
I remember it. I remember it well. My back hurts thinking about it.
Well,
No,
listen,
AJ, we got a lot of things that are in the books already. We have plenty of editorials. We're working on public awareness campaigns. We have it. It's just the mayor. That's it. The public is for it. The mayor in this city, especially. I can't speak for other cities. You know, the one obstacle is this mayor, and the secondary obstacle is the FDNY command structure. You know, it's so corrupted.
well, it's
So
historic. It's historic. You're called
right,
FDNY, but you're really not FDNY. You're a subsection of a stepchild of
right,
FDNY, and I love FDNY. You know, don't get me wrong.
yeah,
But
yeah.
the reality is that I've had a long career in EMS. I've had 50 years. And as an EMS administrator, I can tell you, every time there was a major incident in my region, whether it was an MCI, a plane crash, whatever it was, man, I seized that opportunity, you know, because that is the only time that somebody's going to listen. You know, a plane flies into the side of the mountain in Allegheny County and they call me and they say, well, what do you think we should do? We got to package all these bodies. I said, ask for 3 times the number of body bags because that's the only time the commissioners are going to open up the budget. And this is
Right.
the only time. If you guys don't, if you have a campaign underway, you got to get that campaign underway well before the first of the year. Because after the first of the year, we're on to another budget. You know?
The campaign is already gone. It's in full effect here.
Okay.
We're really getting it out there.
Well, I would say
AJ,
send me and my counterparts at EMS One and EMS World all of your campaign, and we'll feather that out. I mean, Facebook and other ways, social media. You know, you saw what's happened with Black Lives Matter. We got to get this corrected. Everybody in the world looks at FDNY and respects you. I bring paramedic students on tours around here in the San Diego area, and they're all amazed. They all, well, we want to ride with FDNY. You know what? They're so busy, they don't take riders. And the reality is, why do they respect FDNY? Because they know you're well trained. There's nobody who has more dedication than the FDNY people, and you got high call volume. I mean, if you're a young, aggressive EMS worker who's paid well, and you're not even paid well, they love you know, the worst thing I had when I was a paramedic was sitting waiting for the next job. I wanted that job when I was first a paramedic, and that's what everybody sees with FDNY. And the public needs to see it. The public needs to see the other side. The other side is that, yeah, we love our job, but we don't get any rest. That ambulance you see running by your house, you'll probably see that same ambulance 3 times in the next 8 hours. So,
Right.
you know, God bless you. God love you. Pass along all of my respects to everybody at FDNY. And maybe this message will get out and help a little bit. But I appreciate you coming on the show today. It was great. It was, to me, it was sad. But we have to let the message be told. I mean, the saddest thing for me, I mean, pay, certainly number one on the list, but it's really not number one on a priority list when you think that if I get killed, my family's only going to get three years of my salary. That to me is criminal, especially when the counterparts, you know, in other divisions and other branches get more. So we'll see what we can do. Thank you, and
Thanks, AJ.
thanks for being on.